newspaper, as you can imagine. Most media houses zoning in on the budget speech that we're anticipating today. It is one of the most anticipated budget speeches since 1994. We're being told the economy obviously on everyone's mind and how to boost it. And despite negative outlooks from ratings agencies, how do we make sure that it survives and it thrives? In fact, well, to help us to preview tonight's budget speech is economist and market analyst Lavan Gopaul. He joins us now from our Durban studios. Always such a huge pleasure to have you with us. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Good morning to all of your viewers. Of course, this is an important budget as we peer at the beginnings of Budget 2016. It's a time where we're on the brink of junk status. And if we've seen the rand demise through December, and of course, a number of mining houses have started to shed jobs, big industry also looking at cutting jobs. So altogether, a very sensitive economic time. It's not all doom and gloom. There may be a few ways that we can see improvement. Some of the hints at improvement have already been spelt out over the last few weeks, and that's certain expansionary policy by way of trade and industry. They're looking at cutting down on the red tape, enabling people to get finance for loans, and this is likely to create jobs. So as state funds become available for startups, that's likely to be one good takeaway. Unfortunately, the rest of it is not good news. There's been quite a bit of talk around VAT increasing. We've looked at a number of case scenarios, anything from 1% to 3%, and this would mean an extra percent on VAT could add as much as 10 to 15 billion into government revenue. Your viewers will also be aware that because we've had something of a difficult corporate environment, this means that companies are now paying, on a net basis, less tax. So government has less money to spend on those all-important services for schools, housing, etc. And they would have to make a plan in terms of getting more funds. And so they're going to look at VAT, that's one. They may possibly play with corporate taxes. A few players looking at maybe as much as a 1 or 2% increase in company taxes, just to be able to prevent too much of a deficit on this budget.
Mr. Gopaul, clearly you've given us enough context that he is going to have such a tough juggling act, the minister, that he has to be all things to all men, so he might just save some. He will have to go to great lengths to appease rating agencies as well, to avoid that much dreaded junk status. In your opinion, what do you think he must do in order to get the nod from the ratings agencies?
So this is a very delicate point. We want to make sure that the rating agencies favor us in a strong light and we avoid that junk status. It's important because we need that foreign investment into South Africa. So the way to prevent a junk status would be for Pravin Gordhan to do as much as he can to diminish any sort of deficit, to show that this budget almost balances out. As I've mentioned, he may have to raise VAT. There's also been talk and hints from the State of the Nation address that we may look at justifying state-owned entities. So those non-performing assets, for example, the SAA, may well be under the scope, and it may be a case where a national government decides to privatize them just so as to enable extra revenue into the system. At the same time, whilst they're trying to cater for some of the highlights that the rating agencies would look for, a number of trade unions are concerned that if we privatize assets, it may further compromise jobs. So it is something of a balancing act as we try and save jobs, try and make sure that we appease the rating agencies and the trade unions. And in all of this, make sure that the deficit remains in and around that 50% of GDP. Just to let you know, that's the level that we're sitting at. And so it's important that we don't get into further debt. There is also talk that the government may be forced to entertain quite a bit of borrowings within the short term. So more government bonds to be issued just to add some fluid to the system.
Thank you so much for that analysis, Mr. Lavan Gopaul. Clearly, Minister Pravin Gordhan has got his work cut out for him this day when he's going to be announcing that much-anticipated budget speech. The issue of privatization you touched on, a contentious and rather thorny issue that may or may not come to the fore. A lot of people wanting to see whether or not their own interests will be reflected in this budget. Is it going to be pro-poor? Is it going to come hard on the rich? So those are some of the issues that we'll be looking out for. Leanne also spoke about the fees must fall movement, and they'll be wanting to know whether or not they can expect anything from the minister as well. So all eyes, I suppose, on Minister Pravin Gordhan. But that is, in fact, at the top of our news headlines.